Hey, Lauren.
How you doing?
Doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Hey,
Good.
let's talk about Google Forms.
Sure.
We're just going to do just the basics today and walk people through who have never really used forms, the basics of how to create specifically a quiz that we want feedback and responses. Okay?
Fantastic.
All right, awesome. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead over to my drive and I'm going to open up by clicking New. I'm going to click on More and I'm going to open up that Google Forms. From here, I have just an untitled form. So I'm going to go ahead right now and give it a title. I'm just going to call it test form. We can create several different forms. We could do a poll, a survey, a quiz, and we're going to specifically talk about quizzes today. Is that right?
That's right. I think quizzes will be super helpful for teachers as they are in distance learning.
Great. Okay. So we can see that populated my title for my quiz. So if I go through and look at this form, it looks pretty basic. I know that I can add questions, different types of questions. I can also customize it. Can you walk me through, if I click on this little palette, what that can do for me?
Sure. That art palette right there, if you click on that, that's going to be able to allow you to change the header. So you can customize the header and you can change the theme colors. So if you change the theme colors, obviously those you're clicking around, those are changing the background and the colors of the bars. And if you change the header, for example, you can actually put in one of the templates that they've already outlined for you. It could be for a party topic. Work and school is up at top as default. There are lots of different templates to choose from. If you grab one of those and you insert it, you'll see that the background kind of Google automatically, intuitively changes the background color to look like that header that you've chosen. So let's see what colors pop up based on the color of the header.
Beth, I can see we have the image as our header, and it looks wonderful. So let's go further over to our settings and take a look at, can you tell me a little bit about the settings?
Sure. I would recommend to everyone that before you start building your form, after you kind of get it customized in terms of your header and the color and the font, then go to settings immediately, because this is going to really tailor it to meet the needs of your audience and you, in fact, and how you're going to get these results back. So the general tab where this opens up, if you click on collect email addresses, that will automatically collect those for you. And I think that's important because it's a nice backup. If you click on response receipts, you'll see that if the respondent requests it, they'll get a receipt of their responses. So it will tell them what they've actually said, or you can click always there and it would just kick it to the respondent automatically, telling them what their responses were.
Cool.
The next one down is super, super important because sometimes we forget this little one. If it says requires sign-in, so by default, this next one, this restriction to Twinsburg City School domain is automatically checked. And that's something we really need to consider as far as who you're sending this form to. If it's your students, then go ahead and leave it on. But if it's your students' parents and guardians, then you're going to want to uncheck that, because really this is restricting this form only to those people within our Twinsburg domain, aka they have a Twinsburg CSD account. So if it's parents, they likely only have Gmail or another account. You got to uncheck that or they won't have access to the form. The next one down is limit to one response. That is probably likely that you're going to want to check that if it is a quiz, and I'll show you how that will auto default. But if you only want the respondents to submit one response, even if it's a survey, then you go ahead and click that. And then what respondents can see, can they edit and submit it? By default, it's off, but if you prefer that they edit and submit it, go ahead and check that. And then do you want them to see the summary chart and text responses? So if you have that bottom one turned on, they're going to see the summary charts of their results, essentially, and their progress.
Great. So let's take a look at the other tabs here. Let's go over to quizzes, since that's what we're creating. And I noticed that there's like a grayed out button that I'm going to click on because I want this to be a quiz, and it generates all these other options for me. Can you explain a little bit about the lock mode on Chromebooks?
Sure. So when you opened this form up, you decided to choose a blank form. And they have an option for a blank quiz or a blank form. But if you start with a blank form and you want to turn that over to a quiz, it's as easy as you just showed. Click on the quizzes and click on the make this a quiz button. Okay. And now it's a quiz. So this locked mode on Chromebooks, if that is turned on, that's a really cool feature. But there is one drawback. If it's on, this particular Google form will go into what's called a kiosk mode, and it will, when the respondent opens it up, it's the only thing that it's going to take up the full screen of their Chromebook, and they cannot minimize and go to a different tab. So that's important as far as fidelity of the quiz. Now, when it's turned on, that means that you have to have a district issued device. So that means any student using BYOD, bring your own device, or any of the students using a device at home, this won't work and they cannot take the quiz. So just please keep that in mind.
Okay. If I click immediately after each submission, the students can see their grade. I can also wait and manually review each one of the quizzes, and then it will send an email when I submit that. I also like these options down here. Respondent can see. They can see their missed questions, but I question sometimes if teachers want to make sure, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Beth. If I click that they can see correct answers, then if I want to give the student another chance, that sort of defeats the purpose. Is that right?
That's right. Same thing with missed questions. If a student knows, for example, let's say it's a 5-question quiz, for example, if it's just a formative assessment, you might allow that. But if you're really trying to give a quiz with fidelity to some degree and you leave missed questions checked, they will know which ones they've missed. And if they want to share that with their friends, they can certainly do that. Same thing with correct answers. If you leave that correct answers checked, they're going to be able to see what the correct response was. And again, that has its time and place. You just have to decide.
Great. Let's look at this presentation tab, the progression bar. They can see how much further they have or how many more questions or how long it's going to take them before they're done with their quiz. Can also,
yeah, that's really cool. That one, like, for example, if you have 10 questions, it would say 2 of 10 have been filled out.
Yeah, that's so cool. And then also I can shuffle the question order. Tell me about the confirmation message.
Confirmation message is really cool because you can customize that message. Right now, it would just say when they hit submit, it'll come back to them that says your response has been recorded as a generic message. But you might want to customize it like, have a wonderful upcoming weekend. If they're taking this quiz on a Friday, you can really customize that to look however you want it to for your students, which is really neat.
And then we always have to make sure we click save for those.
Always click save. Good call.
Let's talk about adding questions and sections to our quiz.
Fantastic. Let's do it. So the top button right there is where you're going to add a question. That plus sign adds a question. And I will have one recommendation. I know a lot of teachers may have made this mistake once, including myself. If you don't ask the student's name, you're only going to get their email address back. And that's going to be tough because it's their first and last initial and their student ID. And try pouring through all your students that way. That's difficult. So ask them as a first question, what is their first and last name? Then you can add another question. But before we do that, do you see the options there? We have short answer. By default, it kind of intuitively recognized that you needed a short answer there. You can, for longer responses, add a paragraph, multiple. It by default recognized that you want a short answer there. The other thing we are going to do before we pop to the next question is make sure we require it. So slide that button. You'll see an asterisk in red populate to this question now. When we move on, you'll see it. But requiring that so that students can't accidentally or inadvertently skip to the next question. You require it, they can't move on. So we're going to add another question here by choosing that top button. So we've added a question. And before we go on, you'll see that it actually defaulted to multiple choice, okay? And Lauren typed in a question, what color is the box? And she's going to put some options here, red, blue, green. And you'll notice down below that because we've made this a quiz, we have an answer key button. Okay, so click that answer key button. And now we're in the answer key portion. She's going to choose the correct answer. She's going to crank up the point value. And then she's going to hit done. Now with that, we now have a check mark, as you can see in green, next to the correct answer, indicating that you've put an answer in there, and now Google Forms will automatically grade this when the responses come in. So we do want to make sure it's required.
And then Beth, I'm going to go back here because I saw this add answer feedback that I think is pretty cool. Notice correct answers and correct answers. So for my incorrect answers, let's say I taught a math lesson and I recorded a video in Screencastify that they already watched. If I copy that link, I can insert that link right here, and the students can watch that video after they see how they did on the quiz. So let's go ahead right now and just insert quickly a little video for the students to watch if they get an incorrect answer. So I'm going to go ahead and say, please watch this video.
For further explanation or something. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and click here. And what this does is this allows me to search. If I have a URL, I can go ahead and paste that under the URL. But I'm going to type in something, how to add fractions. And I'm going to look for something by Math Antics right here. If I click on this and I click select, then it's going to formulate that video right under the section where they had missed their question. I'm going to go over here to correct answers then, and I can go ahead and click excellent. And I'm going to go ahead and click save.
So Lauren, that's a really cool feature because what you're saying is you can pop those in for remediation and or even enrichment. That's
exactly,
awesome.
Exactly. And in our next video, the more advanced one, we'll show you how to differentiate the pathway that the student takes within the form according to their knowledge or what questions they missed. Beth, I'm going to add one more quick question just for the sake of having this. Let's say trees are green. Again, I know that's not really a question, but let me just simply say yes or no. My answer key is going to be yes. I'm not going to do any feedback. I'm going to add a point, and I'm going to be done. So tell me how I can see this as the students would see it.
Really quickly, let me show you. See above the other two before we move on, what is your name is required? And there's a red asterisk there. You know it's required because of that red asterisk, okay? You know it's not required if you don't see that asterisk there, all right? So now, if you want to preview this as a student, because oftentimes when we're building these, we want to see what the student sees. That's a really good question. There's an eyeball in between the paint palette up top and the settings gear. So click on the eyeball, and now it's as if you would be taking this. So remember, we talked originally about the progress bar and being able to see how far they've worked through. You see that at the bottom it says page 1 of 1. Well, if we were to create another page to this, for example, like another section, you would see page 1 of 2. And I'm sure we'll get back to that in just a minute. But here you see all 3 questions in one section, and maybe you like the way that looks, and boom, you would be done. Sometimes when we push it to students, teachers need just a quick reminder that it's kind of locked in this place when you push it out in Classroom. If you need to grab and edit this form from Google Classroom, remember that little editing pencil in the lower right-hand corner. That's a good tip.
Beth, I also know that when I would give quizzes, sometimes I wanted my students just to see one thing at a time. And so I really like the section feature, which is these 2 rectangles, or it looks like an equal sign. So after they write their name, I'm going to put a new section. And what happens is that follows whatever question you're on. It populates this title or like a little title section. We don't want anything there. We just want it separated. And so you'll see what happens if I get rid of that and I'm going to go to my question. Again, I want another section after this question. I'm going to click my boxes again, and you can see I have 3 sections in my quiz. Now, if I go back to the eyeball, what happens is when the students are taking the quiz, they see one question at a time, and there's that progress bar Beth was talking about. I'm going to deliberately put the wrong answer, and then we see one question at a time. If I want to view my score as a student, what happens now is I can see which ones I got correct and incorrect, and here's that video that I can watch because I missed this question.
That's fantastic, Lauren. And the other piece of that you just mentioned about putting them into specific sections, it's really clean from the student's perspective, and it kind of is not overwhelming. One question at a time. I really like that suggestion. It's cool.
Yeah, I really like that as well. What do I do if I want to share this with my students?
Good question. So it seems like it's intimidating to click that send button, but go ahead and click it because it doesn't necessarily mean it's out of your hands yet. So it brings up this box and it says that it's automatically going to collect Twinsburg City School email addresses because we had that on before. And then you can choose to put in specific emails here, but that's probably not the most efficient way. If you're only sending it to 1 or 2 individuals, boom, you can do it that way. That's fine. But what I would recommend is grabbing the link here. Okay, so go ahead and click on that middle link, look to it, shorten it up, and then copy that link. And that is how we send it to people. So you can send that into a bulk email by the link. You can take that over to Google Classroom and push it out that way. It's just a really easy way to send it using the link.
I love it. So after I have all of my students take a quiz, I see up here responses, and I see that there's one. If I click on responses, then tell me about this page.
So that's interesting because you have to click on responses to see where the student's information went. And then it gives you some more feedback about which questions were missed frequently, the email addresses of everybody that responded, and so on and so forth. You can see it in one kind of snapshot. But then let's say we want to dig a little deeper. So we hit the questions tab next. We can go up to the drop down and you can choose the respondents by their email address.
And because there's just me, I don't have anyone else to choose.
Exactly. And then there's one more way that's super efficient to grab the responses. And we'll come back to this page, I know, because you'll probably talk a little bit about releasing these scores. If you see the green Google Sheet icon and click that up top, we're going to create a new spreadsheet where you can dump it into an existing one. Likely you'll create a new one. So what's neat is Google can populate all of these into a Google Sheet.
Great. And then tell me a little bit about releasing scores.
So you originally had chosen to grade it and release them manually after further review, which typically, if it's a quiz, I would do the same so that they're not sharing how they did, essentially, how students did with one another. So here's where you're going to release it and send them notification of how they did, and they get an email notification that corresponds. And there's the ding. See, you got that response sent to you, and there's the pop-up that shows score was released.
Beth, tell me about these 3 dots over here. I have lots of choices. One of them I'm really curious about is the add collaborators.
So that feature is really neat. If you and I are co-teaching, we can work on the same Google form and tackle it together. So if you invite me as a collaborator, if you type my name in that box, enter the names, you'll see by default there's a pencil to the right of my name that allows me to edit and work with you. And then you can add a little message to me when you send this. See where it says add message? Say, let's work together. So if you pop open the add message, you can just tell me a little quick message. And in the email, when I open this up, it'll give me this message as well.
Is there anything else we need to go over, Beth?
One of the things I think you need to know would be the undo button. So if I inadvertently or accidentally trashed one of my questions, I would come back to these 3 dots and click undo, and then that question would come back for you. And then the other one that I think is important would be to make a copy. if you want to make an entire copy of this form, this would be a good feature to have, a button to use to have.
And Beth, I'm going to throw something in here. When I would share editing rights, I always would make a copy beforehand because it's funny how things can get goofed up. So it's not a bad idea if you have something that you've already created and now you want to share it out and get someone else's opinion on it or have them edit, just make a copy of that just in case something happens and you lose it.
How true is that? And if I'm editing something that you didn't necessarily think was within the vision, that's going to be huge. Good idea.
And then we can move this to the trash, and then we could print, and then really these other things are pretty intense. We don't need to necessarily go there at this time.
Right.
Perfect. I think that we're good, Beth. We think we've covered the basics of forms. And again, if people have any questions, they can email us.
As always, reach out. Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Beth.